Good day, everyone. Our topic is all about dimensions of development, which are education, economic growth, and employment. Education as a factor of dimensions of the sustainable development. Education is one of the key factors that affects all dimensions of sustainable development and can credibly enhance the integration of the dimensions in a cross-sectoral manner. Apart from being one of the Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs itself, education has a transformative characteristics that, if delivered properly, can significantly trigger equitable economic development, increase social inclusion, foster environmental sustainability, and improve governance. Numerous academic studies suggest that higher level of education in a nation has a statistically significant impact on all dimensions of sustainable development. Based from this graphic organizer, education for sustainable development is interrelated with economy, social issues, governance, and environment. Education and economic dimension can end extreme poverty. Numerous studies at the micro and macro levels have shown the increase in the level of education increases individual and national income. Eradication of extreme poverty requires a complex approach of which education available and accessible for people in extreme poverty make them develop necessary skills and become more compatible in the labor market. However, one issue to be cautious is that not only accessibility of education but also the quality of it, often crucial for becoming skilled labor. Education and social dimension. Under it, we have human rights and socio-political inclusion. Educated citizens are more aware and knowledgeable about their fundamental rights. In fact, the more literate citizens are, the more demanding they become, and the more pressure they are likely to exert their government and local authorities. Particularly ethnic or religious minorities and women are the most affected segment of population in terms of violations of human rights. Educating those groups will necessarily increase their awareness and put pressure on policymakers or abandon discriminatory policies. Education and social dimension. Under it, we have conflict and internal violence. Conflicts, violence, and civil wars are the most significant barriers to the sustainable development. As we have witnesses, countries affected by conflicts have not been able to achieve any sustainability. This implies that ending and preventing internal violent conflicts need to be a number one priority of many nations in order to develop in sustainable manner. Many studies, including of Collier and Hoffler in 2002, have confirmed that the level of education has strong statistical association in the onset of conflicts and its duration. Nations with a large uneducated population has a high likelihood of experiencing a civil war or violent conflicts because these people are easily recruited to different rebel groups. Unable to find other sources of income, uneducated citizens are likely to join violent groups that promise an immediate better life or greater future. Education and environment dimension. Nations around the world are concerned about the environmental challenge because these problems directly affect economic development, agriculture, migration, conflict, and general well-being of citizens. Education plays a crucial role in addressing some of these issues, incorporating issues such as biodiversity, climate change, disaster management, and sustainable consumption in the teaching and learning at the school can make a significant difference. In fact, UNESCO manages different projects in this regard and hold workshops with educators. Education and governance. Development economists and political scientists have widely studied both what determines good governance are for development. For example, Rakumar and Squarb in 2008 examines the efficacy of public spending on education and health and argue that it can be explained by the quality of governance in respected nations. Public spending on health reduces child mortality rates in countries with good governance. Also, public spending on primary education is more effective primary education enrollments in nations with better governance indicators. In contrast, public spending has no significant effect on child mortality and primary education in countries with poor governance. Economic growth. So what is economic growth? Economic growth is a long-term expansion of productive potential. There are two kinds of economic growth. Economic growth. So what is economic growth all about? When we say growth, it is a long-term expansion of productive potential. There are two kinds of economic growth. We have the short-term growth and the long-term growth. When we say short-term growth, it is the annual percentage change in the real national output, while long-term growth is shown by the increase in trends potential GDP, and this is illustrated by outward shift in a country's long-run aggregate supply curve or LRAS. Factors of economic growth. For the economy to grow, there are factors to be considered. First is the natural resources. Natural resources have a double-edged effect on economic growth, in that the intensity of its use raises output but increases its depletion rate. Natural resources is a key input in the production process that stimulates economic growth. Second factor is human capital. Human capital and economic growth have a strong correlation. Human capital affects economic growth and can help to develop an economy by expanding the knowledge and skills of its people. These skills provide economic value since an eligible workforce can lead to increased productivity. Third, capital goods. Tools, machinery, buildings, vehicles, computers, and construction equipment are all types of capital goods. Capital goods are one of the four leading economic factors. An increase in orders and shipments of capital goods is a sign that businesses expect more demand and economy will grow. Fourth, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs boost economic growth by introducing innovative technologies, products, and services. Increased competition from entrepreneurs challenges existing firms to become more competitive. Entrepreneurial activity raises the productivity of firms and economists. Types of economic growth. We have the positive growth and the negative growth. When we say positive growth, if the value of an area's growth and services is higher in the 1 year before, it experiences positive growth, usually simplified called economic growth. The negative growth in the year when less value than the year before is produced and sold it experience negative economic growth, also called recession or depression. So there are benefits and risks of economic growth. So let's talk about first the benefits of economic growth. First is foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment creates new jobs and more opportunities as inventors build new companies in foreign countries. This can lead to an increase in income and more purchasing power to locals, which in turn leads to an overall boost in targeted economies. Second, technological innovation. One of the major benefits of innovation is its contribution to economic growth. Simply put, innovation can lead to higher productivity, meaning that the same input generates a greater output. As productivity rises, more goods and services are produced. In other words, the economy will grow. Economy grows. Third, economies of scale. Economies of scale are cost advantages that can occur when a company increases their scale of production and becomes more efficient, resulting in a decreased cost per unit. This is because the cost of production, including fixed and variable costs, is spread over more units of production. Moving on to the risk of economic growth. First is inequitable distribution. At a macroeconomic level, inequality can be a brake on growth and can lead to instability. Economic inequality means unequal access to wealth and income. This is through increases in stress, which is a known risk factor for many diseases. Spells are robustly associated with more inequality or equality in the income distribution. Second, threat to sovereignty. Sovereign risk is the potential that a nation's government will default on its sovereign debt by failing to meet its interest or principal payments. Sovereign risk is typically low but can cause losses of investors in bonds whose issuers are experiencing economic woes, leading to a sovereign debt crisis. Third, interdependencies. A risk of interdependence lies in that many companies take advantage of the high demand for jobs and abuse their power to help themselves. Interdependence allows Western economies to take advantage of developing with weaker economies. There are 5 importance of economic growth. First is higher tax revenue. Taxes generally contribute to the gross domestic product or GDP of a country. Because of this contribution, taxes help spur economic growth, which in turn has a ripple effect on the country's economy, raising the standard of living, increasing job creation. Second, public sector investment. Public investment is a key driver of long-term productivity and economic growth. The evidence shows that investments in infrastructures and human capital are critical to ensuring future prosperity in the economy, particularly when inequality is high. Third, private sector investment. The private sector is the engine of growth. Successful businesses drive growth, create jobs, and pay taxes that finance services and investment. In developing countries, the private sector generates 90% of jobs, funds 60% of all investments, and provides more than 80% of government revenues. Fourth, increased productive capacity. Increased productivity means greater output from the same amount of input. Increased gross domestic product and overall economic output will drive economic growth, improving the economy and the participants within the economy. Fifth is economic growth. Economic growth generates job opportunities and hence stronger demand for labor, the main and often the sole assets of the poor. In turn, increasing employment has been crucial in delivering higher growth.
In continuation, the report of Ms. Angielyn about economic growth, there are elements of economic growth. Number 1 is developing human capital, securing social capital, protecting environmental capital, and providing physical capital. In number 1, developing human capital. Human capital and economic growth have a correlation, meaning human capital affects economic growth. It can help to develop and expand the knowledge and skills of people. The second one is securing social capital. From the word itself, secure, meaning ligtas. Kung alam ng worker or ng employee na sila ay ligtas, may kasiguraduhan na magtataas ang kanilang mga ginagawa or mapapabuti ang kanilang mga ginagawa. Protecting environmental capital. Of course, we must see to it that the workplace is protected from any harm. Providing physical capital. When we say providing physical capital, it is a man-made. So, kinakailangan dito ng manpower. Economic growth in terms of increase in employment, fall in unemployment, increase in tax revenue, increase spending on public services, increase consumption, and encourages investments. Based on the illustration, economic growth also had the ups and downs. There is an increase in the employment, but when there is fall in unemployment, the economy is becoming inefficient. Inefficient in the sense that the market is overusing the resources. When there is an increase in the tax revenue, it is good for the economy. Well, of course, it is good for the government. Whereas in increase spending on public services. There are also benefits of economic growth. We have higher employment, mas mataas na trabaho, improved business confidence, increased tax revenues, improved living standards, mas may magandang pamumuhay, higher investments, potential environment benefits, and improvement in welfare. Employment defined as a contract in which one person, the employee, agrees to perform work for another. The employer, the work is designed to accomplish the employer's goals and mission, and in exchange for work performed, the employee receives compensation. So, dito kinakailangan ng kontrata ng employee at ng employer. So, bago pipirmahan ni employee yung kanyang kontrata, babasahin niya ang mga terms and conditions. So, kapag nagustuhan ni employee yung mga terms and conditions and yung nakadesign na work sa kanya, the employee will sign the contract given by the employer. So, hindi na siya pwedeng umatras doon dahil napirmahan na niya ang kanyang kontrata. Employment definition is a relationship between two parties, usually based on a contract where work is paid for. Where one party, which may be a corporation, for-profit, not-for-profit organization, cooperative, or other entity is the employer and the other is the employee. Therefore, employment is an agreement between an employer and an employee that the employee will do certain services of the job and the employer will pay the employee the certain compensation. So, kung ano lang yung nakasaad doon sa kontrata na nagagawin ng employee, yun lamang ang mga dapat nagagawin ni employee. So, nakabase na doon yung kanyang mga sahod doon sa kontrata na kanyang pinirmahan. Workers and employment. All those who are engaged in economic activities are called workers. They are called the tertiary workers. Who are these workers? They are the worker that provides services. For example, sa mga health. So they are those the doctors, the nurses, and lahat ng nasa field ng health. We have also education, so it includes the teachers, of course. Agriculture, and kasali na rin lahat ang mga nasa sectors in the government. Next, those who help the main workers are also workers. They are called the secondary worker. So, they do the physical work. So, sino-sino ang mga gumagawa ng physical work na mga trabahador? So, they are the one na gumagawa ng mga sasakyan, nasa chemical and engineering company or industry, construction, and shipbuilding. Those who are self-employed are also workers. Of course, kahit na... And they are also called primary workers. Those primary workers includes farming, fishing, and mining. So kahit na primary worker lang sila, they're still contributing and paying their own taxes. Workers and employment temporarily abstain from work due to illness, injury, or other physical disability, bad weather, festivals, social or religious functions are also workers. In here, worker also have their rights. Dapat bago sila nagpumirma sa kanilang kontrata, alam nila yung mga detalye nun na in terms or in times na sila ay magkasakit, kailangan nilang mag-file ng leave of absences. Kapag sila ay nadisgrasya or nagkaroon ng injuries and other physical disability, kailangan nakasaad doon sa kanilang kontrata na hindi sila tatanggalin kapag may mga ganoong pangyayari. Or, for example, there is a bad weather, may bagyo, so hindi porke hindi sila nakapasok at that time, tatanggalin na kaagad sila ni employer. So, dapat nakalagay lahat doon sa kontrata that the employer cannot do na tatanggalin na lang sila without their consent. And of course, with the other activities like festival and social or religious functions also. So, education, the higher the education, the higher the chance to get or to have a decent job. Thank you and good day.